Hi, my name is Greg Canty, and I'd like to welcome you to the Win Happy podcast. I love chatting to people from all walks of life about their lives and their careers, about the choices they make along the way to pursue their happiness, and what winning actually means to them. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I do. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat with Siobhan Cronin, the editor of the Southern Star, one of Ireland's most successful regional newspapers. Siobhan is as passionate about media as she is about open water swimming, and we chatted about both. She remembers the days when you would literally have a sentence stuck in your shoe, and she now juggles the balance between the printed newspaper and embracing the opportunities of digital. We spoke about autism, AI, car tax, the best place to swim, the importance of a decent holiday, and Canty's Cove. Let's hear from Siobhan. Siobhan Cronin, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning, Greg. Doing great.
Or it's good noon. It's just gone 12. It's just gone 12. So technically it's not the morning anymore.
Well, it's a lovely day here in West Cork. So as usual, we're blessed to be here.
A huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast. And to be clear, I need to make sure I've got the right woman. Are you the classical crossover violinist with a virtuoso rock flair?
That's Siobhan Cronin, who stole my website, actually. I used to be SiobhanCronin.com a long time ago when I had great aspirations to be a famous freelance journalist. And I let it slide and she picked it up. So I do know of her, but I haven't met her. But she is a famous classical violinist, I believe, in the US or Canada or somewhere.
I think that might be a nice idea for podcasts, wouldn't it? If you got two people who share the same name and you brought them together randomly.
Exactly. I've often thought that'd be a great one, actually. Yeah.
I was doing a little Mr. Google on my own name one time, and I thought this is very interesting that someone shared your own name. And I found this poor guy who was incarcerated somewhere in the States. He was a black guy called Greg Canty, and I thought, oh, I must reach out to him. And I was told very quickly, you will not, he's in prison. And then suddenly on my blog, you know, the way sometimes you can see how traffic comes onto your blog and you can see the keywords that people were using. And it was a very sad one. It's a number of years back. It was Greg Canty, R.I.P.
Oh.
Yeah, it was some poor guy in the States, a different guy again, and who had passed away suddenly. And that's why all the traffic was coming onto my site. I'm sure people came on there saying, yeah, he's white suddenly and he looks like he's still alive, which we're all confused now. You feel kind of connected to someone with your own name, wouldn't you?
You do, and you kind of are under the illusion sometimes that you're the only one with that name. But I actually struck up a great relationship with another Siobhan Cronin, would you believe, who got my Aer Lingus tickets one time. And then she got some Ryanair tickets because our names are very similar on our Gmail account. And then she actually got a contract for a job another time, and she just sent it back to me and she said, congratulations on the new job. So I've never met her. I don't know where she is, but we have this kind of a strange relationship whereby every so often we get each other's emails, which is kind of cute because I trust her implicitly now at this stage, having sent back my contract. Not ever mentioned it to anyone, I don't think.
She hasn't disclosed your high earnings and all that kind of stuff to the world. And my own Deirdre Waldron, which isn't the most common of names either. And there's someone working within our industry with exactly the same name, very senior, I think in advertising or something. And like that, we've been to events and they've got mixed up. Now, I never ended up sitting next to a different wife. You know, the mix-up didn't go that far. But there has been confusion with her as well. And I think on one occasion, I think whoever Deirdre was talking to had a run-in with the other Deirdre Waldron. And so no. That's the other one.
That's when it can be not so...
not so pleasant. But exactly. I believe that other Deirdre Waldron is supposed to be very nice and professional and all that kind of good stuff. But back to Siobhan Cronin. You're the editor of the Southern Star, not the famous violinist.
Exactly.
Yeah. How are you keeping?
I'm keeping very well. Yeah, why wouldn't I be
I
in
know.
this
And
wonderful part of the world?
what's going on in your head at the moment? What's
I have 1 year out for the plumber that I was telling you might be arriving, and they're so elusive in West Cork that you have to make sure you grab them when they're moving. And I'm actually on the first day of my holidays as well, Greg. So I'm in a very kind of happy, clappy kind of a mood today,
yeah, happy
trying to
holiday?
find ways to fill my time now for a few days. So
Aren't holidays so precious?
so precious. We don't get enough of them, and even though we get a lot more than our friends in other countries, I think we should get more. I think we should. I'm kind of toying with that wonderful idea of the 3-day week. If only we could bring that in.
Yeah. And then does the third working day become an extreme Friday in a funny way?
That's,
You
that is
know,
the fear, and the Irish are kind of prone to that kind of a thing. So I used to have a 4-day week actually when I worked for the Irish Independent many moons ago, and we had it pretty much nailed, I think. We had 4 very long but very effective days, and we really enjoyed our 3 days off then back in those days. And I was one of the lucky ones. I had a Monday off, which gave me a 3-day weekend. So gosh, I really did appreciate it. But we worked hard to get there. So we'd long hours, finished work about 10:30 p.m. So
is a Monday a weird way to be off, is it?
I found it was really, especially in Dublin, it was really interesting because that's the day that a lot of hospitality workers and also theatre workers are off, museum workers. So when you go around shopping on a Monday, which of course you always left your shopping to Monday because it was a quiet day, there was kind of a recognition, little nod that you'd give to people in shops that, you're one of the Monday day people who had this lovely day off where you could avoid queues. And remember the days when you had to go to the motor tax office to get your car taxed
Oh,
on a Monday and there wouldn't
touchy
be much of a
subject for
queue.
me with motor
All
tax.
right.
Yeah, for the simple reason that I ended up getting I was fined because I wasn't displaying my motor tax. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell? You get the email, you pay it straight away, or you will forget it. So sure enough, I double checked my emails. I had the confirmation that it was paid and everything. So I obviously was never posted the disc.
Oh,
So I rang the motor office. Terrible after getting a fine. You obviously never sent it to me. And then there was a big hullabaloo. You need to go to the guards, fill out an RF134 form, and then you need to bring that to the local motor office, who you won't be able to get an appointment with. You're better off posting it to them. And then when they get the RF134 form and a letter or whatever, they'll send you out a disc. So I went through all of that rigmarole. Actually, that was quite interesting. I went to the guards, and the Gardaí office in Ballincollig, I'm on a right now, which is, Ballincollig. It's a very, very built-up place at this stage. The guard office is colossal compared to the small little house that it used to be before. Now, before, when it was a small house, all day and all night you could wander in there and there's someone manning the reception desk or whatever. So going down to get a form signed wasn't a big deal. Now the big fancy Dan thing, you go down, I went down, and what I realised quickly, it's open either mornings or afternoons on alternate days. So that's fine. I was down kind of like 12:30, wasn't open till 2. Said I'd go for a sandwich in the shopping centre. I was there at 2:00. The door was still closed. I rang the bell, rang the buzzer, knocking the door, all that kind of thing. No joy. There was a lad hanging around there, puffing on a cigarette, who told me, sure, that place, that they never open up. So I waited with him, rang the buzzer again a few times. 3/4 of an hour later, I rang the phone number that was listed for that Garda station. Rang and rang and rang. On the third attempt, someone eventually did answer and said, you need to go to Toker Garda station. So I said politely, listen, I've been here 3/4 of an hour. I have no intention of spending another 3/4 of an hour trekking across the... Can you please open the door and fill out this damn form? It'll take you 2 minutes. So to be fair, the Garda, she opened the door and came around, we fill out the form, and she just told me, we don't have the manpower. And I'm thinking to myself, Jeekers almighty, there wouldn't want to be an emergency or you need help quickly. So that was all fine. Got the form, went to the tax office. They actually have a little sign on the door. For your convenience, we've located the postbox inside. Now, this has gone 5:00. So in other words, I couldn't post it anywhere. So I ended up posting it. That was all well and good. I sent the letter to the Cork fines people, a very nice letter saying I had paid my tax. Here's a copy of the confirmation email. I've sent off the RF 134 form, expecting 100% for them to come back and say to me, yeah, that's all cool. You had to pay it, not a bother. No. You had to have it on display. I said, well, I couldn't have it on display because I never actually got it. Then they said, well, if you send us a copy of the RF13 form, we'll consider it. So I sent them the copy of the RF134 form, and then they rejected my appeal because they said it was dated after the day that they had sent me the fine. I said, of course it was dated after. That's when I noticed that I'd never received the disc. And then to add salt into the wounds, by the time our emails exchanged and all that kind of stuff, I was then penalised another €30 because I'd missed the payment date. So the fine went from 60 to 90. And this week I heard they're getting rid of paper discs or whatever. That's in the plan. So sorry.
Boy, am I sorry I mentioned the motor tax office.
Yeah, Monday car tax. And I wrote a blog about it and I sent it in to the lovely people in Cork City Council who manage the parking fines. They all probably think I'm a loop-the-loop. But there you go, Siobhan. What can we do?
What can we do?
So, how long of a holiday are you going?
Oh, I just got the 2 weeks. I'm doing well now to get 2 weeks. It's a busy enough time with a lot of colleagues taking time off, but we were just through the local elections and we possibly have a general coming up. So I think it's time to take a breather because we could be heading in for another few weeks of very intense reporting and shenanigans with politicians. So it's very important, I think, to kind of take a step back and reset. Go again.
And tell me, with your holidays, are you good to come down the gears? You know, when you've got that window of 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think the 2 weeks is very important because I've just noticed I must have checked my phone 5 times this morning for emails. And even though I have an out of office on and I have told people I'm not checking them, I'm not reading them, you're still in that zone, I think, for a few days. So it'll probably take me about 3 days to kind of detach from the email checking. And the other end, a day or two before you're due back, you start kind of catching up again. So I find if I leave the country, I am much better at it because when I love driving holidays around Ireland, but you tend to have the Radio 1 on or News Talk on and you tend to keep up with everything. And then something clicks and you want to ring the office and say, oh, by the way, you should do this story or have you followed up on this story? So you never really disconnect when you're in your own country, I think. So, and you don't disconnect properly on a week's holiday because you've just gotten out of the email checking phase when you're back into the email updating phase with a view to going back. So I think 2 to 3 weeks really is what you need for that reset, and we're in a very high stress industry. So I think it is important that people do reset, get the energy back going again before the next term.
Yeah. I use the analogy of a boat leaving shore. And at the beginning of your holiday, you hop on the boat. But for the first few days, you're still leaving shore and you can still see the shoreline behind you.
Mm.
And eventually, you're so far away from shore that you can't see the shore anymore. And that's the real holiday. And at a particular point in time, the boat has to turn around and start coming back. And you start seeing everything again. And the sweet spot is that little piece in the middle when you can't
see nothing.
Yeah, where you see nothing or you see new things. Do you find when you're on holidays and your head arrives at that peaceful place in that little sweet spot, that weird things start coming into your head, things that you haven't thought of for a long time and little ideas and stuff? It's as if all that regular noise, that some of it is dissipated and you're free to start thinking of new things. Some things that can be strange, things that aren't that pleasant or whatever, but that the clear space in your head.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's really important because, like, as you say, that's the time when the creativity comes back because you the rest of the time you're on a treadmill, you're running to keep up. And very much in the world we're in today, in the world of 24/7 news, you're running constantly, listening to this, watching that. Where's the angle? How can that translate into my world? And it's only when you make that break that you have time to see things differently, see new angles, talk to people who are not in the industry. apart from your family, and get other perspectives on things. And I'm always kind of amazed these days, the number of people I talk to when I leave the job behind, who don't follow news, who don't actually know what's happening in the world, who don't care what's happening in the world. And they give you a really different perspective. And it's good to know that there's people out there who aren't tuned in 24/7 to everything that's happening, because you can really get a very kind of a jaundiced view of things when you're in the industry all the time, and you have this perception that everybody cares what's happening. And actually a lot of people don't. They only care about what's happening in their world, in their bubble, so it's very important to get that perspective.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people deliberately have checked out.
Exactly, especially I think in the last since COVID, especially I've heard that from a lot of people. I don't watch the news, I don't listen to the news. And while that's very disappointing for somebody in the industry, I do understand that. But I also think there's an onus on people to know what's happening in the world, because it's very important, that we take views on things that are happening, and we don't just let the crazies run the asylum, basically. That everyone at least knows what's going on, even if they don't want to participate, that you at least know what's happening in world politics, what's happening in national politics, what's happening on your doorstep, But yeah, I would like to urge people to keep even a small little bit of an interest in what's happening.
Yeah, because if you leave it to the motivated few, can be good motivations or bad motivations, you're just a passenger, really. And before you know it, lots of things have changed, lots of things have happened, and you were oblivious to the whole lot of it. So tell me about you. Who the hell are you, and where did you come from?
Well, I came from Ennis in County Clare, so a lot of people are under the impression I'm a Cork person. So as I say, I'm a Cork person until they're playing Clare in the All-Ireland hurling final. Then I'm a Clare person. I was in Clare last weekend, and there's just flags everywhere, and I was kind of bemused by the fact that the Cork people kind of wait until the last few days before they really get engaged, whereas for Clare people, it's still rare enough for us to be in finals. So and I was at a few of the really big ones in the last few decades, but they really do get engaged. So that's me. I was born in Ennis, and I did a little bit of primary school there, and then my father was working in Shannon Airport, and he went to Cork Airport in 1977. So we moved then, and I went to school in Beaumont in Blackrock and Turner's Cross, and I went straight from there to college in Dublin, which was unusual enough at the time, because all my contemporaries stayed really for UCC, or the old RTC as it was at the time, which I think has changed its name a few times now. It's MTU now.
RTC, CIT.
CIT, now MTU. And I went to the equivalent in Dublin, which was DIT, and now it's Dublin Technological University, I think, DTU. Yeah. So yeah, so that was me, really. That was my progression into journalism.
Was it always journalism for you? Was that what was in your head?
Well, it was really radio, was really what I wanted to do. And I toyed around a lot with some of the pirate stations in Cork at the time. And I had various boyfriends who were DJs, and I used to hang around, and I was an anorak. And I did write a weekly bulletin for a newsletter in the UK called Anorak's UK about radio. So I actually was interested in radio, but I didn't realize, of course, it was journalism is what I was doing at the time. I was reporting every week about what was happening in the radio sector in Ireland. And I went to do journalism in Rathmines with a view to doing radio production, because that was on the syllabus. But when I got there, to my horror, it actually didn't exist for a few months, and myself and another student lobbied, and it came in the second year as a very small part of the syllabus. We borrowed some space from the communications course. So I came out with very little qualifications in radio production, but a good qualification in print. And I said I'd try that for a while, and I've never managed to get out of it since and make the break. So I think I'm kind of stuck with it now. That was 1988 when I left college. So I think I probably need to give up on the whole radio dream now at this stage.
But having said that, you're a podcast host.
Yes, I do love that. Yeah.
So you kind of got there, didn't you, in a roundabout way?
I suppose I did. And that wasn't because I was interested in radio. That was because I was interested in the subject of the podcast, which is swimming. And I just wanted to talk to people about it. So that was kind of my little hobby on the side that I managed to bring into my daily job. But I did, but you know what I found in the first few years of print was that I absolutely loved it. I loved writing. I loved seeing my name in print. And journalists will always, they try to say, "Oh no, I'm kind of used to that now." But you still love to see your name in print at any stage, I think, especially if it's attached to anything you're any small bit proud of. And I loved. They talk about the smell of the ink and the smell of the presses. And I mean, I'm old enough to remember the presses being on site. I mean, they're not really on site in any newspaper now. And I remember the smell of, the smell of those presses in the Independent on Middle Abbey Street, and the noise when they'd kick in the evenings going to press, and in the morning for the Herald. And I'd love to be able to hear the sound of those presses again. But even, of course, the presses have changed now. They're not even noisy anymore. The whole technology has moved on so much. And I used to laugh at, I said to somebody recently, forgetting how young they were, do you remember when you'd go home from work and there'd be like a sentence stuck to your shoe? And they didn't know what I meant. But of course, in the old days, the stories were printed on a bromide, which is a shiny, glossy paper, and wax, Louis wax was put on the back of them, and they were pasted on to a board, and then the board was photographed. But if there was a line or two that didn't fit, they would just be cut with a scalpel. They'd fall onto the floor, and you'd come along, walk on the floor, and you'd end up with loads of bits of little sentences and words stuck to your shoe when you got home. I think that's a memory very few of us have, unfortunately, because technology moved on very quickly after that, and you don't have the old paste-up boards anymore, the paste-up men as they used to be. There were very few women doing that job at the time.
And that interest in radio or journalism, what stirred that interest in you?
I don't really know, but I was well involved in it before I realised I had a lot of people in the family actually who had been journalists, and I hadn't realised that at the time. My grandfather wrote a gardening column for the Donegal Democrat. My grandmother wrote, I think she did a bit of gardening column as well for either the Derry Journal or the Donegal Democrat. And my grandfather also wrote a column in Irish, I think, for the local newspaper. He was a school principal in Mallinhead. And then I discovered an uncle of mine who was in the UK, who I didn't really know very well, worked for Reuters and PA and The Economist in later years. Before he died, I became quite friendly with him, and he was a sub-editor in The Economist. And also quite a lot of people in my cousins will say, I have a cousin who writes for National Geographic. So unbeknownst to me, there was a lot of writing in the family. And then my mother, who I hadn't realised, she was quite a campaigning woman. My brother was autistic. He died when I was quite young, but she had written an awful lot of letters to the newspapers trying to get support for funding, for children who were autistic, which was very unusual now. We're talking early 70s there. And I found a lot of her letters that she had kept after she died, to the Irish Press and the Irish Times. So again, there was something I really wasn't that aware of. And she was a very good writer and a very good advocate. So I think, unbeknownst to me, there was probably a seed in my head, from before I was born, that was going to lead me in that direction.
And was he older or younger than you, your brother?
He was older than me. He would have been next in line to me because I'm the youngest. So he would have been in institutional care in those days in the 70s. They really, there were very little supports for autistic kids, and he died when I was 19. So I was quite young at the time, and he would have always been in care from when I was quite young. So I'd only have seen him when we went to visit him every few weeks. So I wouldn't have had a very, very close relationship with him. But I became very interested in that whole area then of disability and autism. And I've watched very closely what has happened, and it's really quite depressing to see an awful lot of the same worries and fears of parents that my own parents had, which was always my mother's fear. What would happen to him after she and my father died? And that was always a big fear of hers. And he predeceased her, and she kind of felt in a way that was, it sounds very kind of cruel, but that, that she was spared that horrible fear of what would happen after she died. And he died of a massive brain hemorrhage. But I read the papers and I see letters still from parents, asking about supports for adult children or adult people with autism who have grown out of that system when they're over 18. And there's really very, very little available. And it's still a huge fear for parents And it's really, quite depressing to think that since the 70s, we really have not got a handle on that whatsoever in this country.
So for you, was that one of your Saturday or Sunday things that you had to do, going to visit your brother? What was his name?
Absolutely. Tommy Cronin was named after my dad, who was Tom. And we would go and visit him. He was in the Brothers of Charity in Bonmore in Limerick. And there was another thing when we moved to Cork. I know it broke my mother's heart that we had to go. What she's felt was so far away from him that we couldn't see him as often as we used to. But we used to take that Sunday drive myself. And I was almost brought up like an only child because he was in care. And then my older siblings, there was like 9 years between me and the next. So when I was quite young, they'd all left home. So it was really just myself, my mum and dad for a long time. And we would make that trip on a Sunday, all right, to see him. And, gosh, my mother's heart was really broken, by the fact that she couldn't keep him at home, but he was very tall, he was very strong. And in those days, the only, therapy in inverted commas was actually medication, So like, at least we've come a long way now that autistic people are living, quite well in society. But again, what happens when they become adults and they have no, that their dependents, but their parents are gone? It is a bit shocking, really, that we haven't solved that problem.
Were they heartbreaking visits for his young sister, Siobhan?
Well, there was such a gap in age, I suppose, for a long time. I didn't really understand why he was there, and he always looked so normal to me, as in, I mean, I know normal is the wrong word, but as in autistic children don't physically look quite different. And for a young Siobhan, couldn't quite, I suppose, get her head around why he was in care. And it was only as I got older then I realized he could be quite difficult, to communicate with. But he was very handsome. He was probably the most handsome person in our family. He was the tallest. He was a really, really talented artist. But there's a lot of artists in the family. But that was the one thing that gave him solace, I think, and used to calm him, was that he always had a sketch pad, to hand, and he'd often be drawing when we'd go in, and he might draw something that would come into his head when we'd be there. And the pictures were really absolutely beautiful. So it's lovely to have those memories, a long time gone now, but it's lovely to have those memories at least.
That drive home, on those Sundays, having visited him, I'd say there was a lot of quietness in the car, was there?
Exactly, yeah. You spot on, very quiet on the way back,
Yeah.
until the next time when we'd go up again then. And then of course I moved. I was 16 when I left home and went to college in Dublin. So I kind of moved away from it then at that stage. My father died then the following year when I was 17, died of a massive heart attack, just a month after he had retired from work. And that's why I think my mum kind of felt that my father had called my brother, because he died 2 years later. But then, of course, that left her very lonely and very much on her own in the house in Cork. So we'd all tried to get back as much as we could at weekends, because none of us were based in Cork at that point. So it was a tough time for her, for sure.
When someone says something like that your father called your brother, do you buy into that? Do you believe that?
Well, I don't know if I buy into it, but I like the fact that it gave my mother a lot of solace and a lot of comfort to think that that's why he went then, because she always felt that, oh, my father would have been very worried about what would have happened if anything had happened to him, and it did, leaving my mum, to worry about my brother. So I think it was nice that she felt that. I'm not sure, but I mean, it certainly, in retrospect, it was, I suppose, a nice way for both of them to have gone within very similar, I think they were both in March, and just 2 years between them. So, it was shocking at the time, but at least my mother didn't have that worry on her shoulders then, what would happen when she was gone.
You hear that kind of story a lot, don't you? That someone having retired, they pass away really, really quickly after. You'd wonder, is there something in all of that? Is there something in...
Well, I do. Yeah, you see, my dad didn't have a huge amount of hobbies. I mean, he was a great fan of Cove Ramblers, and he was just beginning to kind of go on, train trips with the lads to follow them. And I mean, he would enjoy watching sport, but he wouldn't have had a huge number of hobbies. I think it was playing on him before he retired, and it did play on his mind about what would he do next? What was, they talk about the second and third stage of life now, and we're all supposed to have great plans for retirement. But in those days, you didn't really have a great plan for your retirement because a lot of people weren't expected to live for very long after they're retired anyway. So I think he was a little bit worried about what was next. And of course, nowadays, when you work for the public service, there is great training for your retirement. And in the lead up to it, you were given loads of advice about your finances and, what to do with your time. So that it's a very kind of, I suppose, a just transition is the kind of the catchphrase these days. It's a nice transition. Whereas in those days, you were just cut off, you were gone. So I think that did play on his mind for sure. He probably wouldn't have been the healthiest either. He was a heavy smoker and didn't have a huge amount of exercise. And I know heart conditions are in the family. So all of that combined to be the perfect storm of an unhealthy time, I suppose. So it's definitely played on my mind. And I've always said, that I'd like to retire before I'm 65 because I want to have a good, healthy, happy retirement. And I don't want to kind of just keep pushing things to the very end and then be too exhausted to do anything when I do retire. So that certainly has stayed with me.
We do need to think about those things, don't we?
We do for sure nowadays because we can all live to well over 100, I think, at this stage. So, that could be a good 35 years.
Yeah. Talk to me about your journalistic career from those early days in Dublin.
So my first job after I left college was in the Leitrim Observer. And I remember I was living with my sister and her now husband. And I remember he had gotten the call when I was out that there was a job in Leitrim. And I remember he was laughing hysterically, saying to me, "Do you even know where Leitrim is?"
Good question.
And I said, I can find it. I can find it on a map. I'll find it. So I headed off to Leitrim, having never been there. I never been to the northwest really, except to pass through on the way to Donegal. And Carrigan-Shannon is an absolutely beautiful town. I don't know if you know it, but it's on the Shannon. It's very cosmopolitan. And unbeknownst to me, it suited me down to the ground. Now, the first few months of a new job, not knowing anybody, having no relations, no friends, no nobody up there, I did find it very lonely. And at Christmas, just before Christmas, I sent to my mother a letter and I said, "I don't think I'm going to stay. I think I'm going to come home after and not go back after Christmas. I don't know anybody." And she said, "Just give it 6 months, give it a proper 6 months and then think about it again." But I had the most wonderful Christmas there before I left. We had a great Christmas party. There was just such a lovely fun gang. I just clicked with everyone overnight. When I went home for Christmas that year, I said, "Nope, I'm staying. I'm sticking with it." And I ended up staying there for 3 years. And then the family bought the Longford newspaper, which had been owned by Albert Reynolds in Longford. And I moved there as news editor. And I was very young at that time, I suppose, to have that role. And I worked myself and Eamon Sweeney, who now, of course, is journalist at Sunday Independent. At one point, things got so bad that I was the only one doing news and he was the only one doing sports. We were stuck for staff for about 6 months. And we used to work till 3 or 4 in the morning. But by God, we had such fun. And Longford was really buzzing at the time because Albert was Taoiseach. And we had loads of stories, we had loads of fun. And then I got a job in Dublin magazine as editor. And I moved back to Dublin because I had kind of missed it since college. And I stayed there for about 2 years. And then a job came up in the Irish Independent as a sub-editor. So I became a sub-editor in the Independent. I was there for 11 years in total. And then at that time, my mother died and the house was kind of empty in Cork. And I was we were selling it, but it was kind of taking a while to sell. And I said I'd move home. I saw a job in the Examiner for deputy features editor and I went and I got it. And I moved home then and I was looking for somewhere then after the house sold. I couldn't afford anything at the time in Cork City, Greg. And an ex-boyfriend of mine turned up again and decided we'd buy a house together in Cork. But we couldn't even, we would love to be by the sea, couldn't afford Clonakilty. And we saw this lovely house in Skibbereen and we decided we'd go for it. And I was commuting then for a while to the Examiner and I had a really bad crash outside Dunmanway one October, November, I think it was. And it kind of put me off the commute, to be honest. So luckily, a job came up in the Southern Star about 6 months after that. And I went for it and I got it. And here I am.
Is there a
So
big difference between all of those publications? Does each of them have a personality of their own? And I know we're talking different time periods as well, of course.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Like completely different, really, when you think about it. But I kind of feel like I've gone full circle because I've ended up back in, local newspaper in the main printed news source in a region, in a good sized town, in a tourist town. So the Southern Star has a lot of similarities with the Leitrim Observer, or the Leitrim Observer of the time. It's changed a lot now too, but so I really do feel I kind of came back full circle. But I really loved my time in the Independent in Dublin, I have to say, because it was during Tony O'Reilly's era. He was, in retrospect now, he was a very good boss. I think we probably didn't appreciate him at the time, but actually the conditions were quite good. The salary was very good. Like I was saying to you, about a 4-day week, because we were working, long on social hours. And I was also there, I suppose, during those great Celtic Tiger years when everybody was kind of having a ball, I suppose, really, and we may be living beyond our means or whatever. But there were good times. I made some great friends that I still have to this day, and it was lovely to have the experience of a big national newspaper, and then to come back down to where I am now, which is lovely too, to be just right in the middle of your community and very close to the action now, I suppose, which is the difference between this and a national paper.
Yeah, talk to me about the Southern Star, and in particular for the listeners who will have maybe a small idea of West Cork and a lesser idea about the Southern Star and the role it plays in the community.
That's the one thing I like about local newspapers. Like, they still have a very important role, and they're still very much, I think, close to people's hearts. Like we hear all the time from people who say, "Oh, we get it every Thursday. My dad will not be without it," or "I send it to my son in Australia," or my brother in London subscribes to it because he wants to know what's happening at home. So I suppose it's the one place where you do get all the local news that's happening. And I think the way the world has gone, we're becoming a little bit more insular. So we actually like to know what's going on very close to us. And it's the only place too you'll get, the local court reports, which I suppose it's a positive and a negative, but I mean, there is an onus on local media to report what's happening. That old phrase, justice must be done and must be seen to be done. And we're the only way that you can see that justice is being done is by the reporting of the courts. And also, of course, the local council meetings are very important, and even down to the municipal district, which are the smaller councils, the local area councils. And at a time, like the local elections recently now, I mean, we got a lot of kudos for the coverage we put into that, especially the count. I mean, we had 3 of us there full time from, I think it was like basically 8 a.m. on the Saturday when they were opening the boxes. I went to Mallow, and the boxes were brought back to Clonakilty then, and we had the count, which went right into the early hours of we left there at 4 a.m. on the Sunday morning, and then back again on the Sunday. So, where are you going to get that kind of, intense coverage? And of course, with the advent of the internet now, we can do that minute by minute and keep people up to date minute by minute. I mean, I remember a time when the local newspaper, it just came out on the Thursday or the Wednesday. And if something happened between then and the next Wednesday or Thursday, you nearly didn't worry about it until the Wednesday. You didn't even have to write it up until the Wednesday, because there was nowhere else that people were going to hear about it in the meantime. I mean, I even predate local radio, really, if you can believe that. So there wasn't anywhere else to get your news. Now we have to have somebody available round the clock if anything happens and any news story breaks, because of our website and, all the other social media platforms. We're on TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram. So, there's no let up now, but that's really good for the reader and the subscriber, because they know if something happens, they know where they're going to get it. And even if you're in Australia now and something big happens in West Cork, you just click on the website and you're there. But of course it has meant the job is never ending, which is why holidays back to the start are really important.
And here you are on your day off chatting to me on the podcast.
Well, this is lovely because the pace is, so relaxed compared to yesterday, which was Wednesday, which was press day, where it's just go, go, go. I mean, you hardly have time for a sandwich, let alone, a lunch break. So It's a lovely juxtaposition now. And anyway, Thursdays, there's always a little bit of a breather. I mean, there was a time when I started in Leitrim, and on the Thursday, you'd usually get a call like this time of year. Someone is bringing a boat down the Shannon. Be at the quay at 3 p.m. with a bag of ice, and see you there. And you'd have, 5 or 6 people from different companies would arrive, and we'd go off, because you could really let your hair down on the Thursday and Friday before the next week really kicked in. And there was nobody in the meantime who was going to cover anything that happened, so you were safe. Now you couldn't be doing that, because sure as anything, once you step on that boat, there's going to be some major story happening back in town, and you're going to be called back. So things have changed a lot, believe me. But we still have you take a little bit of a breath on the Thursday, but I mean, for maybe an hour, and then everything kicks back in again, and then you're back on that treadmill again till the following Wednesday night.
And your role, Siobhan, as editor, how do you describe it? And you really set the tone for everything, don't you? And are you judge and jury as to what gets covered and what doesn't? How do you view it?
Well, I mean, I would. That sounds like a bit of a dictatorship now to me, Greg. I have a really good team, in fairness, and I have a fantastic deputy editor in Martin Claffey, who came to us from the Examiner a few years ago, and we bounce things off each other. And it's very important that I suppose I have someone who's on the same wavelength as me as well, as regards, the content of the newspaper. And I mean, we don't take any strong direction in anything politically, but that's a positive as well, that we don't take a strong direction in anything politically, and we try to keep things very balanced and both sides of the political divide, that everyone gets a fair crack of the whip. We also have 2 really good full-time reporters. Jackie Keogh, I was actually in college with Jackie back in the she might like me saying how long ago, but yeah, we were both in Rathmines. And Kieran, I actually did a bit of work, Kieran Amani, I did a bit of work with in the Examiner. So I know them for years and years. They're both local, embedded in the community. Martin's wife is from outside Bantry. So we all have a really, strong interest in the local area. I mean, I'm hearing horror stories now about some local newspapers where down the country, and the reporters are based in Dublin, and because they can't get reporters. And how you can report in a local newspaper when you're living in the capital city and the whole environment is completely different is beyond me. But unfortunately, that's the way we're going with some newspapers. So that's why I think the Star is very lucky that we're all here. You can meet us in the supermarket. You can give out and complain as much as you like. We try and take it on board. And it's it's a cliche, but it is a team effort. I mean, the front page every week, we all sit around and we talk about it on a Monday. We have another meeting Monday afternoon with the reporters, and then we all talk about it again on a Wednesday morning before we finalise what's going on the page. And if anyone has any concerns about a story, they bring it up then and we all discuss it. So, I mean, although the editor has the final decision, I suppose, I mean, it is very much a team effort about what the content is, and that it reflects, we're all very different people, so that it reflects that as well, that it's not all about arts in West Cork. It's not all about the courts. It's not all about the politics that happens. It's a little bit of everything. And of course, the sports section is one of our most popular sections of the newspaper as well. And Ciara McCarthy, who's the sports editor there now I think he's there longer than I am, he's a really good handle on what people are looking for. And of course, that is the benefit too of social media. People are interacting with us constantly. We're putting our stuff on Facebook and we're seeing the comments below, whether people like the story, don't like the story, think it should be covered more or less. So it's very much a team effort. And I hope that doesn't sound cliched, but I mean, it has to be, Greg, because one person's great news story is an anathema to someone else. So you have to try and get a balance.
Yeah. So collectively you set the tone. I presume a lot of that is down to you as well. That's how you run the place as editor.
Well, as in that is a collegiate effort. Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, I'd often have an idea for a story and I might say it to Martin and he might say, I don't know how that'll run here, maybe not. Or maybe what he'd most often say to me is, well, why don't we take this angle on it instead? And then I go, right, actually I hadn't thought of that, and I mean, that's the way it should be. When I'm not there, it's Martin's prerogative then to move in whatever direction, but he will consult with the reporters on the stories. And very often we push the stories back to the reporters and say, Well, that's a great story, but have you thought about this angle? Have you asked this person what they think? Maybe if we take it in a different direction, we can develop it a little bit more. Yeah, it wouldn't work if it was one person's vision, that's for sure.
And if you're selling a career to a journalist who's listening about working in a regional instead of a national, what are the pluses?
Oh, well, one thing it was always sold to me was it's a fantastic way to start out, first of all, because you get to do everything. You get to make the tea. You get only joking. We all make our own tea mostly. But no, I mean you get to do everything from writing little news briefs to rejigging press releases that come in from PR companies that may or may not need a lot of work. I'll leave that with you. And then you go to council meetings, you go to courts, you begin to see how politics works from the ground up. You also get to dip into the national stories because very often you might have the Taoiseach coming down. There might be a national story that has a local angle to it. So you get to do a little bit of everything. So if you do want to progress to the nationals, they love you in the nationals because they know that you're very well grounded. You're not coming out with one skill set. You've got lots. And also, I always try to remind people about the skill set of the sub-editor because that's really my first love in journalism is the role of the sub-editor. And I'm really worried about AI because I think that's going to dilute that role. But I spent, let me see, in about 15 years of my life in total as a sub-editor. And for those listening, that's where you get the reporter's copy. You edit it, you check it, you fact check it. You may rewrite it, and depending on the reporter, you might have a lot of work to do, or you might have very little work to do. And you put on your headline, and you make sure their name is on it, and you go and you find the picture, and you find So it's very similar to the role of the editor in a local newspaper. But a lot of people coming out of college now don't realize that that's a skill set in itself. You don't have to be a reporter. You don't have to be going out stomping the streets. You can be sitting at the desk and you can be doing a really, really vital role. And it's more important than ever because you're the fact checker. You're the fact checker for that story. So a lot of people forget that and it's not really sold to them as a career. And it's a really, really rewarding career because when you see that story, it mightn't have your name on it, but you know that that's verified and that's as good as it can be because you had your hands on it before it left.
I share your worry about AI. And in a way, I don't share it at all because I'm not worried about it. It's being super hyped up by everyone at the moment. Any of the evidence that I've seen of attempts by people to use it, it's just absolutely pure rubbish. For me, and with the written word, it was a little bit like, do you remember when these online websites came out and you could buy stock imagery? And it was so amazing. You didn't have to go off and get models and all that kind of thing because you can just buy the image. And within a year, you could see them coming over the hill. That's a stock image. I know it is. In exactly the way now I think we see stuff that's written and just baloney. Absolute rubbish. It wasn't written by the heart by anyone. And I'm talking, it could be press releases, it can be copy on websites, it can be the copy of cover letters that you're getting with CVs and everything more than once, and we're recruiting again at the moment. But first of all, there's like a waste paper bin. Anyone who can't write in themselves to you, just forget about it. But there's a few CVs that you would come across where you see they've got good experience. And I'm writing back to someone. I said, can you please just answer these few questions in your own words? Because I think you've got a really, really good CV. And on one or two occasions, I've got as far as interviewing some of those people. And it's really sad. And they're saying, well, a lot of people told me that's what I should do. And this is the advice they've been given. And people spitting back the homepage of your website with a load of raw-ish about, we'll match the fusion values and all this kind of thing. We got a request this week from a client, brand new website, a national brand, actually international, big presence in Ireland, the UK and the US. They just have a new website and the tech guys went all over it and ChatGPT'd all of their subject matter. And the poor person that I was chatting to in marketing just said, I don't have the bandwidth to recalibrate the whole thing, but it's pure and utter rubbish. We never talked like that. They got so much factually wrong. And the problem is there's a lot of people believing that this is how you should do something now. So I think we're all okay, Siobhan.
Well, I don't share your optimism because the reason why it is going to get better and it is going to be able to pick up emotions and it's going to be able to display subtleties and nuances that you think only humans can, but it's going to get better at it, and that's where we're headed. So there will come a time when you will find it difficult to distinguish. Now, that's a good and a bad thing, but I do fear for journalism, to be quite honest, and I have seen some pieces come in that I've had to double check. And, to my horror, they were actually generated by a non-human. So I don't think we're that far off from finding it hard to distinguish. But there is a hope in that they talk about news gathering in journalism, that, a good reporter will be able to do some of the news gathering through AI and then put it together themselves. And that's fair enough if they can be sure that the news that they've gathered has already been fact checked. But I think you'll always need a fact checker somewhere in the business, for that final.
Yeah, and person that understands what it meant for Goalian to win the championship.
Exactly.
And the personality of that village and all the history that went behind it and the nuances about the people in the community and all that kind of thing. The gang in work anyway, no, they absolutely know, Siobhan, I will strangle them. If we fall under that trap, that they really absolutely do. So that was another little hobby horse you caught me on.
I'm rolling them out.
Yeah, that the car attacks and the length of time that we should take holidays. Tell me about the podcast.
The swimming podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I do love it. Now I do news ones, although I tend to leave them to the reporters mostly, but I do like the news ones. But it was just a little nugget I had because there's so many people involved in open water swimming now, and we love to talk. And in fact, we spend more time talking than swimming, I've noticed, especially the women when we get together. And I have some great swimming buddies, some from school that I've reconnected with that swim, and some new friends I've met through swimming. And that's what we have in common, is talking. And we get quite obsessive about the gear and the accessories and where we're going for our next swim and how did we do and what length are we going to go. So I just thought there really isn't much online about it. And there are very few swimming podcasts and very few that kind of interest me as well, because I wanted to do something that was accessible to everybody who has any interest in swimming, and was just really, but at the same time, was just chatty and comfortable and kind of personal too. So what I've done is I've a list of mostly West Cork people, but not exclusively, who swim or write about swimming or are coaching. And I just do a little half an hour interview with them once a month. And we're on coming up to number 15 now. So we're kind of well into our second year of the podcast. And, I'm really enjoying it. And I have to say it's a little bit selfish because it's the last thing I'd like to give up if I was to give up any of my roles, because I do love chatting to people about swimming. It's a little bit of an obsession, but it's one that I think a lot of people share now, especially since COVID.
Yeah, and for the listener, it's called the A to C podcast.
On all major platforms, and the Southern Star website especially.
And Siobhan, something like podcasts and embracing other digital technology. What are the conversations that happen within the Southern Star about any of these developments and, keeping up with the trends and staying relevant alongside the printed version of the newspaper?
Well, we have taken the decision that we're still, print first. Now, I know a lot of our colleagues, especially the nationals, have gone digital first, but I don't think we're there yet. As in, I don't think our audience are there yet. Like the vast majority of our audience still want the printed paper. So until they tell us they don't, we're going to keep going that way. But we are also one of the few, I would say, local newspapers in Ireland that has been really ahead of the game as regards digital. I mean, since before I was there, they've had a digital presence. I'm there, over 10 years now. And we also have like full-time digital staff working exclusively on digital, which again is very unique in local newspapers. I'm finding a lot of my colleagues in other papers are burnt out because they're doing all the print and all the digital stuff as well. But we have that lovely luxury in the Southern Star where we have our digital editorial staff and we have our print editorial staff. But we do mix it up. I mean, obviously I do digital and they often write for the newspaper. But we are keeping a very close eye on what's happening in that space. And, we have introduced subscribers in the last just over a year now to the website. We have subscription-only content. We have exclusive content for subscribers. We put most of our stuff online, but not all of it. And also we stagger it, so you don't get everything the next day for free on the website. We stagger it over the week until the next paper comes out again. And that's very deliberate policy, because we still want print to be our primary product for now. But, we've built a studio. Before COVID, we built a studio in the Southern Star for podcasting, especially the sports podcast was the first one that really took off. And they're going several years now, every week. And really good content on that, led by Kieran McCarthy and his staff in the sports section. And then we followed on then with a news podcast, and we do a podcast called The Big Story, which is it's basically like a mini documentary that we do every month. And also an awful lot of our podcasts are visual as well. So they're on video, they're on our YouTube channel, and they're on the Southern Star website under the podcast tab. So we've really been ahead of the pack, as regards local newspapers in Ireland. And, I'm very proud to be able to say that, because we're not in a catching up mode like so many of them are now. And we do also have the skill set, because we did a lot of training during COVID on Zoom, on video. So all our reporters are trained on video and audio reporting, as well as, obviously print. But so when they go to do a court, if it's a big court case, they can immediately top and tail a little video, 2 or 3 minute video, get it up and get it out straight away. And that's really important, because that is the future, without a doubt. So, I think we're in a good space now, hopefully.
Yeah, and that provides another opportunity for advertisers as well in another platform.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And they have really come on board with that. And, there was a time not that long ago when people would say, oh, well, I won't advertise on Southern Star because I want to advertise on social media. But I mean, for a long time, we've been able to say, well, actually, that's fine, because you can just advertise on our social media or in the print or both, whichever your demographic that you want to attract is, which again is good, because a lot of local newspapers are really struggling with that, dual purpose element, and they're all just trying to catch up now when the horse has bolted, really.
I was chatting to another person working in media, and they run 100% online publication in Cork City. And he was telling me that one of their key metrics is obviously views and everything, but the views through the different social media channels. And I think it was maybe at the beginning of last year, he said there was a change with Facebook specifically, that suddenly the algorithms took a particular turn when it came to media publications, and his clicks from Facebook literally just plummeted overnight. So you are vulnerable to, even though you're providing free news in so many ways to so many readers, you're vulnerable to changes with the algorithms and everything else. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, we've seen that as well, for sure. And yeah, all the media organizations have seen that. Facebook really have pushed us down the priority list when it comes to people's news feeds. But, we always took the view that our primary source for getting the news out online was the website anyway. And, so that's our first and foremost point that we direct people to, is the Star website. Some of those stories go onto Facebook, some of them don't. And Facebook is becoming less and less relevant, without a shadow of a doubt, and even X, the former Twitter, to the same extent. So, we've been driving things more towards TikTok and Snapchat now in the last 6 months, I'd say, for sure. And I'm not sure how long we'll stick with the Facebook. Well, that's up to our digital manager, really. Personally, I think we're probably putting less and less up there, because it's not giving us that much of a feedback. And also, we have to keep such a close eye on comments, because, the defamation laws, we're trying to get them updated at the moment in Ireland, but they're really very restrictive. And you have to be so careful of what people are saying. We don't allow comments on court cases anymore. It's far too dangerous. But I mean, people they just feel emboldened by social media, that they'd say things under a story that they would never say to the person if they met them on the street. So, we have to constantly watch that as well. So therefore, Facebook is becoming almost a bit of a liability. I'd say in the next few years it will be. So I think a lot of news organizations will move out of that space, to be honest.
That's so interesting. I'm always blown away by what I learn when I sit down on a Saturday with the printed newspaper and you go from cover to cover. And you can give me the online version and you can subscribe to the Southern Star. But when I do go through the paper, there's only so much clicking that you'll do. Whereas when you buy the physical paper and you have your cup of coffee and you take a bit of time with it, you will always learn something. I find with online, you'll get 50 versions of the big story instead of reading the big story and then going on to another story and another story and another story. You know, the editor carefully lays out the paper so you get the different news and the different sections, and yeah, you're very well-rounded coming away from that experience. And yet the digital thing, no matter how clever you are with your subscriptions and your social media accounts, we're not informed and we're missing things.
And not only that, Greg, but you will sleep better after reading the paper before you go to bed than after reading your phone, because we know now that screens have a very negative impact on your sleeping patterns. So I would say bring the paper to bed, not the phone.
Spoken as a true newspaper woman. Well done.
Exactly.
What's front cover gold?
Oh, a good headline, I think. I have to say, and put my hands up, I did like when we went with Awesome after the recent elections, because women had done so much better in West Cork than in other regions. I really smiled at that one, so I do like that. And also always a good human interest story of a dog that fell off a cliff and was rescued and is happily in the arms of its owner. That's always a good one too. And I really, we're really struggling to find good, happy news stories, but I mean, at the moment, those are newspaper gold if you can find them.
Brilliant. You're on the Win Happy podcast, on the subject of happy. What's happiness to you?
Oh, I would say swimming in Knockine on a Saturday morning in October when it's much quieter than during the summer, and yet there's still a lot of nice warmth in the air and warmth in the water, and the paper's been put to bed and we're not worrying too much until Monday morning.
Is swimming your happy place?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I only discovered it really late in life because of a back operation. I was forced into it. And I'm just sorry I missed like 30 good years of swimming.
Yeah, I'm petrified of the water. And I have been. My daughter, she suffered with lupus, and sea swimming has been a game changer for her. But she's got a fantastic regime of sea swimming, which she absolutely loves. And she's had a baby recently, so that's probably curtailed her activities a little bit. Why is it so good? Why is sea swimming so enjoyable?
Well, I think it's one of the few places where you can go where you are really disconnected, from the land. I mean, first of all, if you are out swimming, you have to concentrate on your breathing. You have to concentrate on where you are, look around you, make sure you're not crashing into a kayak or another swimmer, and you also want to see what's under the water. And now they've done research into it, and it does actually change the way that your brain cells work. And don't ask me for the science, but I do have that lovely book, The Blue Mind, and that phrase that was coined by a marine biologist. And that they reckon it does bring you to a happy place. It actually does physically change the metabolism and the way the ions are working, the positive and the negative ions work. So we think we're enjoying it and we think we're happy, but we actually are. We are actually happier in water. And I think it probably comes back to something to do with being in the womb and, that environment. But when you put your head under the water and you're looking at fish and you're looking at starfish, and it's like being on another planet without having to leave this one. And I think that's what I like so much about it. It's a real disconnect. And when you have a really busy, crazy 24/7 mad life, it's just lovely to put your head under the water and just disconnect from it all for a few minutes.
So you go swimming in Lochine. Do you go anywhere else? Any other favourite spots?
Oh, I do. Yes, there's a beautiful place called Canty's Cove down Dunmanus, which is probably my favourite place. And there's some amazing little caves there. And even Schull, along the waterfront in Schull, I love swimming there. And I'm just back from a swim in Mount Shannon on the Shannon, and I do the Killary swim every year up in between Galway Mayo border, which is probably the most magnificent location for a swim in Ireland. It's on the fjord up there, the only fjord in Ireland, and a gang of us women go there every September, and it's like that's our happy place for a weekend. So I'd hate to miss that. So that's another one of them.
Now, you have to tell the story of how Canty's Cove got its name.
Well, I do believe there was a pirate involved in it, and I'm not casting any aspersions, Greg, but I'm sure you probably know more about your family history than I do. And I think there was something about him throwing people off the steps, and I have swam around to see the pirate steps. And did he throw his enemies off the top of those steps?
Yeah, I think it was explained to me. Did he have a house there or a hostel or something? And there was a hatch somewhere, and he used to take people to a particular spot. And there was like a hatch that he could open, and they'd drop into the ocean there and drown. So that's why
Wow.
it got that name. We'll have to sharpen up on that story. That's my little version of it. I've got a very interesting guy, actually. I'm not sure if you've come across him, Siobhan. A guy called Mike Baldwin, like the character in Coronation Street. And he wrote the book about the Mizzen, and it's lots of folklore and all that kind of thing. I think he did one on Skibbereen as well. Yeah, I think he's covered Canty's Cove, definitely. He's a neighbour. He actually lives in London, and he comes back regularly. Really nice guy. And so we need to get the factual story about.
As a non-swimmer, have you been in there, Greg?
I've gone down there. It's a tricky little spot to get down to, isn't it?
It's a little bit tricky, but I suppose when you're used to it, it's not too bad. But it's one of these places that has a beautiful turquoise, no matter the weather, because I think it has a sandy bottom, as they say,
Okay.
and because of the direction of the cliffs on either side, it just looks quite, let's say, Mediterranean on a sunny day. It's quite beautiful, but I mean, it's not the only really spectacular cove around West Cork, but it's certainly the fact it has that little added extra of the mystery of Canty the pirate, I think, makes it a little bit more attractive to most people.
Yeah, I go on a lovely cycle around there. I cycled Dunmanus Bay, which is just amazing. Lots of hills, a lot of
Yes,
hills.
really worth the trip for the views.
In terms of winning, what does winning look like for you? What are those things you want to achieve? What do you have in your head?
Oh, well, I remember when I went for the job in the Star saying I want to make it the best little newspaper in the country, if not the world. So I'm still on that track. I'm still trying to get there. But it's that, and I suppose it's just a sense of to leave this world hoping that you might have made some little positive change to it, you know. So I mean I've over the years I've written a few pieces that I would see, I suppose, kind of campaigning journalism, things that I think just needed to be said, and campaigns that I got involved with in Longford. And I suppose even from school, I was a member of CND. I got involved with Amnesty. I was always walking in, pride marches and campaigning for marriage equality. And so I would just like to think that, when I go, I'll have done my best to make the world a better place. But of course, that's increasingly difficult in the current environment. It seems everyone is trying to catch us out on that one. So I suppose happiness for me is just trying to do a little bit better all the time and trying to make sure that I don't do any damage, I suppose. Do no damage, isn't that the trick?
Yeah, and my very last question for you is, could you share with me your favorite media day?
What day in the job?
Yeah.
I don't know if it was my favorite, but it was probably my most memorable was we were going to press the night that Albert Reynolds the party was electing the new Taoiseach, and we weren't sure if he was going to make it or not, but we were going to be too late with the newspaper. So we ran an 8 banner headline Taoiseach on the front of the Longford News. And if he didn't make it, we were going to be the most famous paper in the world for getting it completely wrong. But the printers wouldn't wait any longer. So we did our figures. I think he was close. He was there or thereabouts, we reckoned, getting it. And we went with the banner headline. We sent it off. And my God, I thought I would never, ever be able to cope again with the stress of that one. But next morning got up, and sure enough, Albert had made it, and he was elected Taoiseach. So we ended up being on Sky News and everything with that front page then as a result, because we were the only paper that called it. And I suppose we had something similar there when the lads won gold in the rowing there in Brazil, because we had to make a call on that one as well. But what happened with that one was we waited until we were sure, obviously, and the printers, our lovely printers in Webprint in Mahon, did actually wait. And I think that paper went to bed at about 3 a.m. Now, normally our print deadline is 7 p.m. So we did get quite an extension. But we were the only paper in the country to have them on the front page, having won the gold. So that was another memorable day. But I think it all went back to the confidence I had in running with the Taoiseach headline in the Longford News way back. And gosh, what was that? 89 or 90, I think.
So who made the brave call on going for it?
I did.
Wow.
I was news editor at the time. So, yeah, I just said, you know what? I'm going to go with this one.
Yeah.
And
is that in your nature? That kind of like...
I'll be out of town so quickly if I'm wrong. They'll never hear Siobhan Cronin again.
Yeah.
But no, actually, I'm not a risk taker. But I think sometimes in journalism, you just have to kind of put your money where your mouth is and go for it.
So it could have been a case of Siobhan being marched out of the office.
Exactly. Maybe I would have been looking for that job in radio after all. Under pseudonym.
Where are you going on holidays?
Croatia.
Dubrovnik. Lovely.
I haven't been there. I've been to Trieste or I've been never to Dubrovnik. So looking forward to that.
Yeah. Will you be swimming?
Oh, for sure. That's all I'll be doing, to be honest, Greg. And it's going to be really warm. So I'll be getting up early and I'll be going in late in the evening and I'll be having a long leisurely lunch in between in the shade.
Yeah. Siobhan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And by the way, the plumber never arrived. What time did he say he'd be with you?
He didn't give me a time in true West Cork fashion. He said sometime today. So there's still a few hours left.
Yeah, there's an electrician that I've been tic-tacking with, and it's actually embarrassing at this stage. And this is the thing, local, you'll meet him in the shop in Goleen, you know, and I'll say, yeah, how are you doing? I'm still waiting. I promise you, I'll call into you tonight. And you get the text, I'm running late, I'm really sorry, but I will get to you. He said, that's okay. I'm here waiting for you.
Good to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And months later, and I don't know how they can do it. I actually challenged one of the tradespeople like that. I said, why can't you just be honest and say, I'm not going to make it? And Jeremy said to me, Siobhan, I don't want to lose the work to someone else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're like, Jesus.
No, but you're probably more likely to lose it by not giving a time. Like, you're right. If they said 3 months, I can't do you for 3 months, but I'll be there then. That'll be fine. But in fairness, I have no complaints about my plumber because I know he will turn up today because he always does. And that's the reason he didn't give me a time, because I would have held him to it. But if he gives me a day, I'm happy then.
Next time we chat, you can tell me, and you can tell me all about your holiday.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. And you have to come to Crookhaven as well, Siobhan, for that chat,
yes.
maybe.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
I never say no to a visit to Crookhaven, to be honest with you.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Siobhan, thank you so much. Have a great time.
Thanks,
yeah,
Greg.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the When Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.